When hardened bounty hunter Bo Kincaid discovered a half-frozen child abandoned in a freight car with a note reading, "No one's child," he had no idea that saving her would resurrect ghosts he'd buried years ago, or that a corrupt official would soon threaten everything he'd sworn to protect. This is the story of a broken man who found redemption in an orphaned girl, and the deadly conspiracy that forced him to become the killer he'd vowed never to be again. Stay until the end to see how far this story reaches, and comment your city so I can see where you're watching from. The wind cut through Devil's Spine Ridge like a razor, carrying snow that stung Bo Kincaid's weathered face as he guided his mare along the frozen railway tracks. January 1882 had come to Wyoming territory with a vengeance, turning the high plains into a white wasteland that swallowed the weak and the foolish alike. Bo was neither, but on that bitter afternoon, even his decades of frontier survival couldn't prepare him for what waited in the shadows of an abandoned freight car. The mare nickered nervously as they approached the rusted boxcar that sat tilted on a forgotten spur line, half buried in snowdrifts. Bo's hand instinctively moved to the colt at his hip. Old habits from his bounty hunting days died hard, even though he'd hung up his guns 3 years ago when Sarah passed. The silence around the boxcar felt wrong, pregnant with something his gut recognized but his mind couldn't yet name. "Easy, girl, he murmured, swinging down from the saddle. His boots crunched through the crusty snow as he approached the freight car's open door. The metal groaned in the wind, a mournful sound that seemed to carry all the loneliness of the endless Wyoming winter. He almost missed her. She was so small, so perfectly still, that his eye passed over the bundle of rags in the corner twice before recognition struck like a lightning bolt. A child. Curled against the far wall of the boxcar, knees drawn to chest, skin pale as the snow outside. For one terrible moment, Bo thought he was too late, that he'd found another frozen casualty of a winter that had already claimed too many lives. Then she coughed. A wet, rattling sound that seemed impossibly loud in the empty car. Bo moved without thinking, years of instinct taking over. He was beside her in 3 strides, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he touched her forehead, burning hot despite the cold. Fever. Hypothermia. Maybe both. He'd seen enough death to know she was walking the razor's edge, like, "Can you hear me?" His voice came out rougher than he'd intended, rusty from weeks of talking to no one but his horse and the ghost that haunted his cabin. The girl's eyelids fluttered. Blue eyes, bright with fever, fixed on his face with an intensity that took him aback. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, though starvation had carved her features sharp and ancient. Are you the angel?" Her voice was barely a whisper, cracked and small. Something twisted in Bo's chest, a pain he'd thought he'd buried with Sarah. "No, darling, just a man. But I'm going to get you warm." He shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her, noting with growing fury the threadbare dress she wore, wholly inadequate for a Wyoming winter. As he lifted her, she weighed nothing, bones and skin and fever, something crinkled against his chest. A piece of paper, pinned to her dress with a rusted safety pin. The note was brief, written in an unsteady hand. "No one's child, no one's burden. May God have mercy." Rage flooded through Bo, hot and sudden. He'd seen cruelty in his years as a bounty hunter, men who killed without conscience, outlaws who preyed on the innocent, but this casual abandonment of a child struck him as a special kind of evil. Someone had left her here to die, alone and terrified in the frozen wilderness. "Well, they're wrong about that," he said softly, more to himself than to the girl. "You're somebody now. You hear me? Somebody." The girl's eyes had closed again, her breathing shallow. Bo moved quickly, carrying her to his horse and mounting with practiced ease despite his burden. He wrapped her in his coat and held her against his chest, feeling the fierce heat of her fever through his shirt. "Stay with me," he commanded as he turned the mare toward town. "You don't get to give up. Not today." The ride to Cedar Falls took an eternity. Bo pushed his mare as hard as he dared, but the snow-covered trail was treacherous, and the last thing the girl needed was a broken neck from a fall. He talked to her the whole way, nonsense mostly, stories about his ranch, descriptions of the mountains in summer, anything to keep her tethered to the world. She stirred occasionally, muttering words he couldn't make out. Once, She called for her mama in a voice so small and lost that Bo had to blink away something that wasn't snow from his eyes. I got you, he told her over and over. I got you. Cedar Falls appeared through the blowing snow like a mirage, a scattered collection of wooden buildings that clung to survival through sheer stubbornness. Bo headed straight for Doc Pritchard's house on the edge of town, a two-story structure that served as both home and clinic for the territory's only physician within 50 miles. He dismounted in a controlled fall, the girl still clutched to his chest, and kicked at the door with his boot. Doc, open up! Medical emergency! The door flew open within seconds. Doctor. Samuel Pritchard stood in the threshold, lamplight spilling around his angular frame. He was a lean man in his 60s with wire-rimmed spectacles and the steady hands of someone who'd seen every kind of human suffering the frontier could produce. Kincaid, what? His eyes fell on the bundle in Bo's arms, and his expression shifted instantly. Inside. Now. Martha. The doctor's wife appeared from the kitchen, a robust woman with graying hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd assisted her husband through countless emergencies. She took one look at the situation and began issuing orders. Hot water, clean linens, Samuel the examining room, Mr. Kincaid this way. The next hour passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Bo stood aside as Doc Pritchard and Martha worked over the girl with practiced efficiency, stripping away her inadequate clothing, wrapping her in warm blankets, checking her vital signs with grim concentration. Severe hypothermia, Pritchard muttered, mostly to himself. Pneumonia, certainly. Signs of prolonged malnutrition and dehydration. He looked up at Bo with an expression that mixed medical concern with human anger. Where did you find her? Abandoned freight car up on the old spur line. This was pinned to her. Bo handed over the crumpled note. Pritchard read it, his jaw tightening. Monsters, he said quietly. There are monsters in this world that don't need fangs or claws. Will she make it? The doctor was silent for a long moment, listening to the girl's labored breathing. Honestly, I don't know. The next 24 hours will tell. If the fever breaks and her lungs don't fill with fluid. He trailed off, the unspoken alternatives hanging heavy in the air. She's a fighter, Bo heard himself say. Could see it in her eyes. Pritchard glanced at him with something like surprise. In the 3 years since Sarah's death, Bo had become something of a ghost himself. A man who fulfilled his obligations but engaged with no one, spoke to no one, cared about nothing beyond the daily mechanics of survival. This sudden advocacy for a stranger's child was unexpected. Then we'll give her every chance to fight, Pritchard said. Martha, let's get some warm broth in her if she'll take it. As the hours stretched on, Bo found he couldn't leave. He told himself he was just being practical. He'd brought her in, he should see it through. But the truth ran deeper than that. Something about the child had gotten under his skin, reached past the walls he'd built around himself. He sat in Pritchard's parlor as evening fell and oil lamps were lit against the darkness. Martha brought him coffee and stew, which he ate mechanically, his ears attuned to every sound from the examining room. Around midnight, Pritchard emerged, rolling down his shirt sleeves with the careful movements of an exhausted man. The fever's holding steady, he reported. Not better, but not worse. That's something. She's sleeping now, a real sleep instead of that feverish half-state. He dropped into a chair across from Bo with a heavy sigh. Now, suppose you tell me the whole story. Bo recounted the discovery, the freight car, the note, the desperate race to town. Pritchard listened without interruption, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Did she say anything? The doctor asked when Bo finished. Anything about who she is, where she came from? Nothing coherent. She asked if I was an angel, which tells you how far gone she was. Bo paused, remembering. She called for her mama once, that's all. Pritchard was quiet for a moment. There's something you should know. While we were treating her, I noticed something, a birthmark. He stood and gestured for Bo to follow. Come, I'll show you. They entered the examining room quietly. The girl lay on a bed that swallowed her small frame, buried under layers of quilts. Her face had more color now, Bo was relieved to see, still pale, but no longer that terrible ash gray of near death. Pritchard gently pulled back the blankets to expose the girl's left shoulder. There, stark against her pale skin, was a birthmark, a distinctive shape that looked almost like a bird in flight, its wings spread wide. Bo felt the world tilt. "I've seen that mark before," Pritchard said softly, watching Bo's face. "3 times, actually. The first was on your late wife, Sarah. The second on her sister, Nora. And now this." The room seemed to contract around Bo. He stared at the birthmark, memory flooding back with painful clarity. Sarah, laughing in the summer sun, her shoulder bare as she worked in the garden. The same mark, the same distinctive shape. She'd called it her family blessing, a trait passed down through generations of Whitlock women. "She's family," Bo whispered. "She's Sarah's family." "It would appear so." Pritchard carefully covered the girl again. "The question is, whose child is she?" Sarah had siblings scattered across 3 territories. Any one of them could be the mother. Or could have been. Bo's voice was flat. That note said no one's child. Past tense, maybe. Could be the mother's dead. "Could be," Pritchard agreed, "but we won't know until the girl can tell us herself, if she remembers. Some children who've been through trauma—" He left the sentence unfinished. Bo sank into the chair beside the bed, his eyes never leaving the girl's face. She looked peaceful now, almost angelic in sleep, so small, so vulnerable, and bearing the mark that tied her to Sarah, to the woman he'd loved and lost. "I'll stay," he said, "tonight, in case she wakes." Pritchard nodded as if he'd expected nothing less. "I'll have Martha bring you a blanket. Try to get some rest, Bo. She'll need you strong tomorrow." But sleep was impossible. Bo sat vigil through the long winter night, listening to the girl's breathing, watching the rise and fall of the quilts. Questions circled his mind like vultures. Which of Sarah's siblings was the mother? Why had the child been abandoned? What circumstances had reduced this little girl to no one's child? And beneath all those questions ran a deeper current, a strange sense that finding this girl wasn't accident or coincidence, that maybe, in some way he couldn't yet fathom, this was meant to be. The girl stirred as dawn light began to seep through the windows, turning the room gray and ghostly. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. For a moment she seemed confused, frightened by the unfamiliar surroundings. Then her gaze found Bo, and something in her expression settled. "You're real," she whispered. "You came back." "I'm real," Bo confirmed, leaning forward. "You're safe now. You're in a doctor's house, in Cedar Falls. Do you remember anything about how you got to that freight car?" The girl's brow furrowed with concentration. "Cold," she said finally. "So cold, and Mama was gone. The man said, he said I had to go, that I was nobody's problem anymore." Her voice cracked. "Is Mama coming back?" Bo's chest tightened. "What's your name, darling?" "Mara." She said it so softly he almost didn't hear. "Mara Whitlock." There it was, confirmation. She was Sarah's blood, no question now. Bo reached out and gently took the girl's small hand in his scarred, calloused one. "My name's Bo Kincaid. I knew a Whitlock once, a woman named Sarah. She was my wife." Something flickered in Mara's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or the ghost of a memory. "Mama talked about Aunt Sarah sometimes. Said she married a man who chased bad people." "That was me," Bo admitted. "Long time ago, though. These days I just run a ranch and mind my own business." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Mara, do you know what happened to your mama?" Tears welled in the girl's eyes and spilled down her cheeks. "She got sick, real sick, couldn't breathe right, and then—" She squeezed her eyes shut. "And then Mr. Crowther came. He talked to the men who worked for Mama, and they packed up all our things. Mr. Crowther said I was going somewhere safe, but then he put me in the train car and locked the door and said nobody wanted me." Rage, white-hot and pure, blazed through Bo. He kept his voice steady through sheer force of will. "This Mr. Crowther, what's his full name?" "Elias Crowther. He's important. Mama always said we had to be nice to him because he worked for the territory." Mara's voice dropped to a whisper. "I was scared of him. He smiled, but his eyes were mean." Bo knew the name. Elias Crowther served as a county official, something to do with land claims and homestead administration. He'd always struck Bo as too slick, too polished for frontier life, a man who wore respectability like a mask. But attempting to murder a child? That was a different breed of evil entirely. "He won't hurt you again," Bo said, and the promise in his voice was ironclad. "I swear it." The door opened quietly, and Pritchard entered, Martha at his heels. Both stopped short when they saw Mara awake and alert. "Well, well," Pritchard said with a warm smile. "Welcome back to the land of the living, young lady. I'm Dr. Pritchard, and this is my wife, Martha. How are you feeling?" "Tired," Mara admitted, "and my chest hurts when I breathe." "That's the pneumonia. We're going to get you sorted out, don't you worry." Pritchard moved to examine her, his movements gentle and professional. "Can you take a deep breath for me?" "Good girl." Again. "Excellent." As the doctor worked, Bo stepped into the hallway with Martha. The older woman studied him with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. "She's Sarah's niece," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, daughter of one of Sarah's siblings. I'm guessing her younger sister Anna, based on the timeline." Bo's jaw clenched. Anna must have died, and Elias Crowther decided the easiest solution was to let the child freeze to death in an abandoned freight car. Martha's expression hardened. "That man needs to answer for this." "He will." Bo's voice carried the cold certainty of a man who'd spent years hunting outlaws. "One way or another, he will." Pritchard emerged from the examining room a few minutes later, looking cautiously optimistic. "She's tough, I'll give her that. The fever's down a degree and her lungs sound marginally better. She's not out of the woods yet, but I'd say her chances have improved to better than even." "How long until she can travel?" "Travel?" Pritchard frowned. "Bo, she needs weeks of rest and care. Maybe longer. Where exactly did you think you were taking her?" "Home. To my ranch." The words came out before Bo had fully thought them through, but once spoken, he knew they were right. "She's family, Doc. Sarah's blood. I can't just leave her in town while I go back to the ranch, and she needs more care than you can provide in a clinic. She needs a home." Pritchard and Martha exchanged a long look, some wordless communication passing between them. "The law might have something to say about that," Pritchard warned. "Crowther's a county official. If he finds out she survived, if he finds out you're planning to take custody, then we don't tell him she survived." Bo's mind was already working through the angles, old instincts from his bounty hunting days kicking in. "Far as anyone knows, I found a child who died of exposure. You have my permission to list her death in your records. Unnamed girl, approximate age 7, succumbed to hypothermia and pneumonia despite treatment." "You're asking me to falsify medical records," Pritchard said slowly. "I'm asking you to protect a child from a man who tried to murder her." Bo met the doctor's eyes steadily. "If Crowther thinks she's dead, he won't come looking, and that gives me time to figure out what really happened to her mother and build a case against him." Martha spoke up. "And if he does find out? If someone sees her, recognizes her?" "My ranch is remote. She won't be going to town anytime soon, not until she's recovered, and we have enough evidence to hang Crowther for what he's done." Bo's expression was grim. "I know it's asking a lot, but that little girl in there has already lost her mother. I won't let her lose her life, too." Pritchard was quiet for a long moment, his face troubled. Then he sighed. "Sarah would want this. She always said you were the most stubborn, relentless man she'd ever met. Looks like she was right." He extended his hand. "All right, Bo. I'll help you. But you need to understand, if this goes wrong, if Crowther finds out and comes after you, I can't protect you from the law. I'm not asking you to." Bo shook the offered hand firmly. "I just need you to give me time." "How much time?" "Enough to make things right." Over the next 3 days, Bo became a fixture at the Pritchard house. He slept in a chair beside Mara's bed, ate whatever Martha put in front of him, and spent his waking hours getting to know the little girl who'd stumbled into his life like a ghost from his past. Mara was sharper than her years suggested, with a quiet intelligence that reminded Bo achingly of Sarah. She spoke little about her mother's death, the memories seemed to pain her too much, but she talked about happier times. Anna Whitlock had run a small homestead in Montana Territory, raising cattle and crops with the help of hired men. They'd had a good life, Mara said, not rich, but comfortable, safe. Then Mama got sick, Mara said on the third evening, her voice barely audible. Started coughing all the time, couldn't catch her breath. The foreman, Mr. Jessup, he wanted to send for a doctor, but Mama said we couldn't afford it. And then Mr. Crowther came. How did he know your mother? Bo asked gently. He said he worked for the territory, that he checked on homesteads to make sure everything was proper. He came twice before Mama got real sick. She didn't like him, I could tell, but she was always polite. Mara's small hands twisted in the quilt. When she got real bad, Mr. Jessup sent for him anyway. Thought maybe he could help, but he didn't help. He just watched. And then Mama died, and he told me I was going to a special place for children with no parents. The freight car. Mara nodded. He locked me in and said to wait. Said someone would come get me, but nobody came. It got so cold, and I was so hungry. I thought... Her voice broke. I thought I was going to die there. Bo pulled her into a gentle embrace, feeling her small body shake with silent sobs. You're safe now, he murmured. I promise you're safe. That night, after Mara had fallen asleep, Bo sat in Pritchard's study with the doctor and a bottle of whiskey. There's something wrong with the whole story, Bo said, staring into his glass. Why would Crowther personally handle the aftermath of Anna's death? That's not typical for a county official. And why go to the trouble of locking Mara in a freight car? If he just wanted to be rid of her, there are orphanages, families who'd take her in. Unless he couldn't risk her talking to anyone, Pritchard said slowly, unless there was something about Anna's death he needed to hide. The two men looked at each other as the implication sank in. You think he killed her? Bo said flatly. I think it's possible. Pneumonia is easy to fake, smother someone, and the symptoms look similar. And if Anna owned land, homestead rights... Pritchard trailed off significantly. Crowther could claim it through legal manipulation, file fraudulent documents, forge a will, declare the property abandoned. Bo's fist clenched around his glass. Son of a bitch is stealing homesteads. It's just speculation, Pritchard warned. We have no proof. Then I'll find proof. Bo drained his whiskey in one burning swallow. But first, I'm taking Mara home. She's strong enough to travel now, and the longer she stays in town, the greater the risk someone spots her. When? Tomorrow, before dawn. We'll use the back trails, avoid the main roads. Bo stood, his decision made. Thank you, Doc, for everything. Send word to my ranch if you hear anything about Crowther. Anything at all. Pritchard nodded. Be careful, Bo. Men like Crowther don't build empires of corruption without learning how to protect them. If he finds out you're investigating him, if he realizes Mara's alive, then he'll find out what happens when you threaten someone under my protection. Bo's voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath the words. I hung up my guns 3 years ago, but I never forgot how to use them. The ride back to Bo's ranch took most of the day. Mara rode in front of him, wrapped in blankets in his heavy coat, still weak but improving with each hour. She asked questions about the land they passed through, about the ranch, about the life waiting for her. Bo answered as best he could, but his mind was already working ahead, planning, strategizing. He'd need supplies, food, medicine, winter clothes for Mara. He'd need to reach out to his few trusted contacts, start gathering information about Crowther and Anna's death, and he'd need to prepare for the possibility that Crowther would discover his deception. As the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of gold and crimson, they crested the final ridge and Bo's ranch spread out below them. A sturdy log house, a barn, corrals and outbuildings, all nestled in a valley sheltered from the worst of the wind. This is home, Bo said. Our home now, if you'll have it. Mara was silent for a moment, taking it all in. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she said, Okay. It was such a small word, but it carried the weight of trust, of hope, of a chance at something new. Bo felt something shift in his chest, a thawing of ice he'd thought permanent. They descended into the valley as stars began to prick the darkening sky. When they reached the house, Bo dismounted and lifted Mara down carefully, surprised by how natural the motion felt. Let's get you inside and warm, he said. Tomorrow we can worry about everything else. But as he carried her through the door and into the firelit warmth of the house he'd shared with Sarah, Bo couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring more than just domestic concerns. Somewhere out there, Elias Crowther was consolidating his stolen empire, confident that a little girl's death had buried his secrets forever. He was wrong, and Bo Kincaid was going to make sure he paid for every crime, every theft, every life destroyed by his greed. The man who'd once been known as the Hawk, the bounty hunter who'd never failed to bring in his quarry, might have been dormant for 3 years, but he wasn't dead. Not by a long shot. The first week passed in a careful rhythm of healing and adjustment. Bo set Mara up in the spare bedroom, the room he and Sarah had always imagined would be a nursery someday, and threw himself into the practicalities of caring for a recovering child. He learned to make broth that wouldn't upset her delicate stomach, to measure out the medicines Pritchard had sent along, to read the signs of fever returning versus normal improvement. Mara watched him with those 2 old eyes, saying little but missing nothing. She was polite to the point of being ghostly, always thanking him for every meal, every blanket, every kindness. It broke his heart a little more each time. "You don't have to thank me for everything," he told her on the 5th morning as she murmured gratitude for the oatmeal he'd set before her. "Mama said being grateful was important," Mara replied, her spoon hovering over the bowl. "Your mama was right. But this is your home now. You don't thank family for taking care of you. That's just what we do." He sat across from her at the scarred wooden table. "Understand?" She nodded slowly, though uncertainty flickered across her face. Trust, Bo was learning, would take longer to heal than pneumonia. On the 8th day, a visitor arrived. Bo heard the horse before he saw it, and his hand moved instinctively toward the rifle above the door before he recognized the rider. Nora Hale, Sarah's younger sister, dismounted in the yard with the easy grace of someone who'd grown up on horseback. She was tall and lean, her dark hair braided down her back, her face weathered by sun and wind into a map of hard-earned strength. She'd married a rancher 10 miles south and visited Bo occasionally, probably out of some sense of duty to her dead sister's memory. He'd always appreciated that she never tried to fix him or fill the silence with empty comfort. "Bo," she called as he stepped onto the porch. "Got your message. Rode over soon as I could." Her sharp eyes moved past him to the window where Mara's small face appeared briefly before vanishing. "That her?" "Come inside. We need to talk." Over coffee at the kitchen table, with Mara napping in the other room, Bo told Nora everything: the freight car, the birthmark, Mara's account of her mother's death, and Crowther's involvement. Nora listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. "Anna," she said when he finished, her voice thick with grief. "I wondered why her letters stopped. Thought maybe she'd moved on, gone east like she always talked about." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "God, that poor child. And that bastard just left her to freeze. Question is, what do we do about it?" Bo leaned back in his chair. "I can't prove Crowther killed Anna. Can't even prove he locked Mara in that freight car. It's just her word against the county officials." "Her word should be enough." "You know it won't be. Not against a man with Crowther's position and influence." Bo's jaw tightened. "I need evidence. Real, hard evidence of what he's doing." Nora was quiet for a moment, her fingers drumming against the table in a gesture Sarah used to make when she was thinking. "Anna's homestead. If Crowther killed her to steal the land, there'll be a paper trail. Deeds, claims, transfers of ownership. Filed with the county office, where Crowther works." "Right." Nora's smile was sharp as a knife. "But land claims are also filed with the territorial office in Cheyenne. Those records are public. Anyone can request copies." Bo felt a spark of hope. "You thinking what I'm thinking? That we take a trip to Cheyenne and do some digging?" Nora nodded. "Damn right I am, but one of us needs to stay here with Mara. She shouldn't be alone, and if Crowther somehow gets wind that she's alive, I'll go." Bo stood, already planning. "You stay with her. She needs a woman's presence anyway, and your family. She'll trust you." "When?" "Tomorrow. The sooner we know what we're dealing with, the better." That evening, Bo sat Mara down and explained that he'd be gone for a few days, that Nora would stay with her, that everything would be fine. He watched fear flash across the girl's face, the primal terror of abandonment that no amount of reassurance could fully erase. "You're coming back?" she asked in a small voice. "I swear it." Bo crouched down to meet her eyes. I'm going to find out what happened to your mama. I'm going to make sure the man who hurt you can't hurt anyone else. But I will come back, Mara. You have my word." She studied his face for a long moment, then reached out and wrapped her thin arms around his neck. Bo froze, then slowly returned the embrace, feeling the fragile trust she was offering like a living thing between them. "Okay," she whispered. "I believe you." The ride to Cheyenne took 3 days through winter weather that alternated between brutal cold and deceptive sunshine. Bo pushed hard, stopping only when his horse needed rest, eating jerky and hardtack in the saddle. His mind churned with possibilities and plans, old investigative instincts waking from their long hibernation. Cheyenne sprawled across the high plains like a promise of civilization, false-fronted buildings, muddy streets, the constant thunder of the railroad that had made the town important. Bo found a boarding house on the edge of town, paid for a week in advance, and set out for the territorial land office. The clerk behind the counter was a young man with ink-stained fingers and the harried expression of someone drowning in paperwork. He barely looked up when Bo approached. "Help you?" "Need to request copies of land claim records, multiple properties across several counties." The clerk sighed. "That'll take time. You'll need to fill out request forms for each property, pay the copying fees, and wait while we pull the records from the archives. Could be days." "I've got days." Bo pulled out a list he'd prepared. Anna's homestead, plus a dozen other properties in the same county that had changed hands in the past 2 years. If Crowther was running a land theft operation, there'd be a pattern. "How much per property?" The copying fees ate into Bo's savings, but money meant nothing compared to justice. He filled out the forms with careful precision, submitted them with the clerk, and was told to come back in 3 days. 3 days of waiting in a town that felt too loud, too crowded after months of solitude on his ranch. Bo used the time to ask questions in saloons and boarding houses, listening to gossip and rumor. Elias Crowther's name came up more than once, always spoken with a mix of respect and wariness that set Bo's teeth on edge. "Sharp man, Crowther," an old-timer told him over whiskey at the Silver Dollar Saloon. "Real sharp when it comes to land deals. Heard he's bought up 6 homesteads in the past year alone. Pays fair price, or so they say." "Bought from who?" "Widows, mostly, or folks who couldn't make a go of it and decided to move on." The old-timer squinted at Bo. "Why you asking?" "Just curious about opportunities. Thinking about buying land myself." But the pattern was already forming in Bo's mind. Widows. People who'd lost the primary landholder and might not understand their rights. Easy targets for a man with legal knowledge and no conscience. On the 3rd day, Bo returned to the land office. The clerk had a stack of documents waiting. Thick folders of claims, deeds, transfers, and amendments. Bo paid the final fees and carried his prize back to the boarding house, where he spread the papers across the narrow bed and began to read. What he found made his blood run cold. Anna's property, 200 acres of good grazing land in Montana Territory, had been transferred to Elias Crowther 6 weeks after her death. The deed listed her signature as granting him power of attorney prior to her passing, with a will that left everything to him in gratitude for his assistance during her final illness. Bo had seen Anna's handwriting in old letters to Sarah. The signature on these documents was close, but not quite right. A skilled forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. And Anna's case wasn't unique. Of the 12 other properties Bo had researched, 8 showed the same pattern. Homesteader dies, usually from sudden illness or accident. Elias Crowther appears with documentation showing the deceased had granted him power of attorney or named him as heir. Property transfers to Crowther, who then sells it at significant profit to cattle companies or railroad interests. It was brilliant in its simplicity. And it was completely illegal. Bo sat back, his mind racing. This was more than enough to raise serious questions. But was it enough to convict? Proving the signatures were forged would require expert testimony. Proving Crowther had actually murdered these people would be nearly impossible without witnesses or physical evidence. He needed more. He needed something undeniable. The answer came to him as he was packing up the documents. If Crowther was selling these stolen properties to major interests, cattle companies, railroads, there would be financial records. Large transactions that would be documented in bank ledgers and corporate books. Follow the money and you'd find the proof. But getting access to those records would require legal authority he didn't have. Unless... Bo left the boarding house and headed for the federal marshal's office. Marshal Thomas Garrett was a grizzled veteran with a reputation for honesty in a territory where such virtue was rare. He listened to Bo's story with a poker face that gave nothing away, examining the copied documents with careful attention. "This is serious," Garrett said finally. "If even half of what you're suggesting is true, we're talking about systematic fraud and possibly multiple murders." He tapped the papers. "But these signatures, you say they're forged." "I'd stake my life on it. I knew Anna Whitlock. That's not her hand." "Your certainty isn't evidence. We'd need a handwriting expert to testify, and even then, a good lawyer could argue the differences are just natural variation." Garrett leaned back in his chair. "The child, Mara, she could testify to what Crowther did. She's 8 years old and she's been through hell. I won't put her on a stand to be torn apart by lawyers." Bo's voice was flat. "There has to be another way." "There might be." Garrett pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began writing. "I can issue you a federal warrant authorizing investigation into suspected land fraud. It won't let you arrest anyone, but it'll give you legal cover to ask questions, request records, conduct interviews. If you find solid evidence, you bring it to me and we'll move forward with formal charges." "That's it? A piece of paper?" "That piece of paper means you're acting with federal authority. It means if Crowther or anyone else tries to stop you, they're obstructing a federal investigation. And it means if you find bodies buried on these properties, literal or figurative, I can bring the full weight of the law down on whoever's responsible." Garrett signed the warrant with a flourish. "But Kincaid, I'm warning you now. You step out of line, you take justice into your own hands, this warrant becomes worthless, and you'll face charges yourself. Understood?" Bo took the document, feeling its weight. "Understood. One more thing." Garrett's eyes were hard. "I've heard of you. The Hawk, they used to call you. Best bounty hunter in 3 territories. You brought in outlaws nobody else could catch, and you always brought them in alive." He paused. "I'm trusting you remember that last part." "I remember." But as Bo rode out of Cheyenne the next morning, the warrant safely tucked in his saddlebag, he wasn't sure that was true, because the rage burning in his chest whenever he thought of Mara locked in that freight car, of Anna dying while Crowther watched with calculating eyes, of all the other victims scattered across the territory. That rage demanded more than courtrooms and legal procedures. It demanded blood. The ride back to his ranch seemed longer than the ride out. Bo's mind churned with plans and contingencies, but underneath it all ran a current of doubt. What if the evidence wasn't enough? What if Crowther had connections that reached higher than a federal marshal? What if, despite everything, the system protected its own and left Mara with nothing but the memory of her mother's murder? He pushed the thoughts aside and focused on the next steps. He'd return home, make sure Mara was safe and settling in with Nora. Then he'd begin the systematic dismantling of Elias Crowther's criminal empire, one piece of evidence at a time. When Bo crested the final ridge and saw his ranch in the valley below, smoke rising from the chimney, he felt something ease in his chest. Home. Strange how that word had regained meaning in the 2 weeks since he'd found Mara. He rode into the yard and dismounted, calling out as he approached the house. The door flew open and Mara burst out, her thin legs carrying her across the porch and down the steps faster than she should have been moving in her still fragile state. "You came back!" She crashed into him with enough force to make him stagger. "You really came back!" Bo caught her automatically, lifting her up even as his arms protested the sudden weight. "Told you I would. I don't break my word, Mara." "Some people do." Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. "Mr. Crowther said he'd take care of me. He lied." "I'm not Mr. Crowther." Bo set her down gently, but kept his hands on her shoulders. "And I'm not going anywhere. We clear?" She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "We're clear." Nora appeared in the doorway, a kitchen towel in her hands and a knowing smile on her face. "Welcome back, Bo. She's been watching for you since dawn." "Only since dawn?" Bo raised an eyebrow at Mara. "Maybe yesterday too," Mara admitted. "A little bit." They went inside, and over dinner Bo told Nora what he'd discovered. The forged documents, the pattern of theft, the federal warrant. Mara listened wide-eyed as he explained how they were building a case against the man who'd hurt her. So we can make him pay? She asked. For what he did to Mama. We're going to try. Bo wouldn't lie to her with false promises. It won't be easy and it won't be quick. But yes, we're going to make him answer for everything. After Mara had gone to bed, Bo and Nora sat by the fire discussing strategy. They needed to investigate quietly, without alerting Crowther that they were onto him. They needed to find more victims, more forged documents, more evidence of the pattern. I can help, Nora said. I know people across 3 counties. Women talk to each other, share stories. If there are other widows who lost land to Crowther, I can find them. It could be dangerous. If Crowther finds out what we're doing, then he finds out. Nora's expression was fierce. Anna was my sister, Bo. That little girl sleeping in there is my niece. You think I'm going to sit idle while some bastard gets away with murder? Looking at her, Bo saw Sarah's steel beneath the surface. The Whitlock women had always been survivors, fighters when they needed to be. All right, we work together, but we're smart about it, careful. No unnecessary risks. Agreed. Over the next 3 weeks, they executed their plan with careful precision. Nora traveled to neighboring counties, visiting women she knew, making discreet inquiries. She discovered 3 more widows who'd lost land to Crowther under suspicious circumstances, all of them telling similar stories of sudden illness, Crowther's helpful intervention, and properties that slipped away before they understood what was happening. Bo focused on the paper trail, requesting more documents from the territorial office, comparing signatures, building a timeline of Crowther's activities. He discovered the man had been running his scheme for at least 5 years, stealing an estimated dozen properties worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And all the while, Mara healed. Her cough faded, her appetite returned, color bloomed in her cheeks. She began helping with small chores around the ranch, feeding the chickens, gathering eggs, sweeping the porch. She was still too quiet, still too careful, but occasionally Bo would catch glimpses of the child she might have been without tragedy. A spark of curiosity, a half smile at something funny, a question about the world beyond the ranch. One evening, as Bo was teaching her to play checkers, she asked, "Why are you doing all this? For Mama, I mean. You didn't know her very well, did you?" Bo considered his answer carefully. "Your Mama was family to Sarah. That makes her family to me. And family looks after each other." "But I'm not really your family," Mara said softly. "Not like a daughter or anything." The words hit harder than they should have. Bo set down the checker piece he'd been holding and met her eyes. "Mara, family isn't just about blood. It's about who you choose to stand beside, who you protect, who you come home to. You're my family because I say you are, if that's all right with you." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "It's all right with me." "Good. Now make your move before I fall asleep from old age." That night, after Mara had gone to bed, Bo sat on the porch looking at the stars. The weight of what he'd taken on pressed down on him, not just the investigation, but the responsibility of raising a child, of being worthy of the trust she was beginning to place in him. He felt Sarah's absence like a physical ache. She would have known what to do, how to comfort Mara, how to make her feel safe and loved. All Bo had was his rough edges and hard-won survival skills, neither of which seemed adequate for parenting. But he'd made a promise to Mara and to Anna's memory. He'd see it through, come what may. The break they'd been waiting for came from an unexpected source. Nora returned from a trip to the county seat with news that sent cold fury through Bo's veins. "Crowther's making his move," she said without preamble. "He filed papers claiming Anna's property based on her will. The county has approved the transfer. He's planning to sell it to the Montana Cattle Company next month." Son of a bitch is getting bold. Bo's fist clenched. He thinks nobody's watching, that he got away clean. There's more. I talked to the county clerk, sweet-talked him really, and he let slip that Crowther's been asking questions. About you. Bo went very still. "What kind of questions?" "Whether you've been to the territorial office, whether you've requested any documents, whether you've been asking about land claims." Nora's expression was grim. "Bo, I think he knows, or at least suspects." "Then we're running out of time." Bo stood, his mind already racing ahead. "We need to force his hand, make him expose himself." "How?" by making him think his secret is about to come out, by making him desperate enough to make a mistake. Bo began pacing, the plan forming as he spoke. We leak information that a federal investigation is looking into land fraud in the territory. We make sure Crowther hears about it. Then we wait and see what he does. That's dangerous. If he panics, he might run. Or worse, he might come after you, after Mara. Let him come. Bo's voice was cold as winter. I'm ready. But Nora grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop pacing and look at her. Sarah made me promise something before she died. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd make sure you didn't destroy yourself with grief or revenge, that I'd keep you human. Her grip tightened. Don't make me break that promise, Bo. Don't become the thing you used to hunt. Her words cut through the rage, forcing him to confront the edge he was walking. The line between justice and vengeance, between protecting Mara and indulging his own need for retribution. I won't, he said finally, but I will stop him, Nora. Whatever it takes within the law, I will stop him. She studied his face, then nodded and released his arm. Then let's do it smart. Let's build a trap he can't escape. They spent the next week carefully laying their snare. Nora spread rumors in the county seat about federal investigators asking questions. Bo made conspicuous visits to the telegraph office, sending messages to the territorial capital. They let slip to the right people, the gossips, the busybodies, the ones who couldn't keep a secret, that big news was coming about land fraud. And then they waited. The response came faster than expected. On a cold afternoon 10 days after they'd set their plan in motion, a rider appeared on the horizon heading toward Bo's ranch. Bo watched from the porch as the man approached, noting the expensive horse, the Eastern-cut clothes, the air of authority. Elias Crowther had come calling. Bo kept his hand relaxed at his side as Crowther dismounted, though every instinct screamed danger. The man was in his late 40s, handsome in a polished way that spoke of city barbers and tailored suits. His smile was practiced, his movements calculated. Everything about him radiated the confidence of a man who'd learned to wear respectability like armor. Mr. Kincaid, I presume. Crowther extended his hand as he approached the porch. Elias Crowther, County Land Administrator. I hope I'm not intruding. Bo didn't take the offered hand. Depends on what you want. Crowther's smile never wavered, though something cold flickered in his eyes. Direct. I appreciate that. May we speak inside? I have a business proposition that might interest you. We can talk right here. Very well. Crowther withdrew his hand smoothly, as if the rejection had been expected. I'll come straight to the point. I'm in the process of consolidating several properties in this region for development purposes. Your ranch sits in a prime location, good water access, protected valley, proximity to the railroad route they're surveying. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer. My land's not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price, Mr. Kincaid. I'm offering you $15,000 cash for your entire property. That's well above market value for a ranch this size. Crowther's tone was reasonable, almost friendly. You could start fresh somewhere else. Buy twice the land in Montana or Colorado. Live comfortably for years. Bo studied the man's face, reading the layers beneath the affable exterior. This wasn't really about buying the ranch. It was a test. Crowther wanted to know what Bo knew, what he was planning, whether he posed a threat. Not interested, Bo said flatly. This land belonged to my wife. I'm keeping it. I understand sentiment, truly I do. But sentiment doesn't pay bills or protect you when circumstances change. Crowther's voice took on a subtle edge. The frontier can be dangerous, Mr. Kincaid. Accidents happen, especially to men who live alone in isolated locations. There it was, the velvet glove slipping to reveal the iron fist beneath. Bo felt cold rage settle in his gut, but he kept his expression neutral. I don't live alone anymore. Got family staying with me now. Something shifted in Crowther's eyes. A flicker of genuine surprise quickly masked. Family? I wasn't aware you had any living relatives. My late wife's niece. She came to stay with me recently. Her mother passed away up in Montana Territory. Bo watched Crowther's face carefully. Maybe you heard about it. Anna Whitlock? For just an instant, Crowther's composure cracked. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his pupils dilated slightly. Then the mask was back, smooth as glass. "I don't believe I know the name," Crowther said. "Montana's a long way from Wyoming, but I'm sorry for your loss." "How old is the child?" "Old enough to remember things. Old enough to tell stories about what happened before her mother died." Bo shifted his weight, a subtle move that put him closer to the rifle leaning beside the door. "Interesting stories, some of them." Crowther's smile had frozen into something brittle. "Children have vivid imaginations. They don't always understand what they've seen or heard. This child understands plenty, understands enough to identify the man who locked her in a freight car and left her to freeze to death." The silence that followed was electric with tension. Crowther's hand had moved slightly toward his coat pocket before stopping, and Bo saw the calculation in his eyes, weighing options, measuring risk, deciding how to play this. "That's quite an accusation," Crowther said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "If such a thing had actually happened, I would think the authorities would be involved." "They are. Federal authorities, as a matter of fact. Been investigating land fraud across 3 territories. Funny how many homesteaders seem to die suddenly, leaving property that ends up in the hands of county officials." Bo's voice was conversational, but his eyes were hard. "Even funnier how those same officials sell the land for substantial profit shortly afterward." Crowther's facade finally crumbled, replaced by naked calculation. "You're making very serious allegations without a shred of proof, allegations that could be considered slanderous." "I've got proof. Forged signatures on deeds, timeline of deaths that coincide with your property acquisitions, testimony from widows you cheated, and I've got that little girl in there who can identify you as the man who murdered her mother and tried to murder her." Bo took a step forward. "How's that for proof?" "That child is dead." The words came out sharp and certain. "She died of exposure in that freight car, just like—" Crowther stopped abruptly, realizing his mistake. "Just like what?" Bo pressed. "Just like you planned? Just like all the others you've killed?" Crowther's hand moved toward his pocket again, but before he could draw whatever weapon he carried, the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked echoed from the barn. Nora stepped into view, the Winchester steady in her hands, and aimed directly at Crowther's chest. "I wouldn't," she said calmly. "I'm a better shot than my sister was, and Sarah could shoot the wings off a fly at 50 yards. Crowther froze, his hand still halfway to his pocket. His eyes darted between Bo and Nora, calculating odds, finding no favorable outcome. "This is assault," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "You're threatening a county official." "We're protecting ourselves from a man who just admitted to murdering a child." Bo moved down the porch steps. "Take your hand away from that pocket, slowly." Crowther complied, his jaw tight with fury. "You think you've won something here? You think this changes anything? I have connections that reach all the way to the territorial governor. I have judges and sheriffs and railroad men who owe me favors. Your word, and that of a child and a woman, means nothing against my reputation." "Maybe not in a county court," Bo agreed, "but federal court's a different story, and all those connections of yours? They'll scatter like rats the moment they realize you're going down. Nobody wants to be associated with a child killer." The door to the house opened and Mara stepped onto the porch. She'd grown stronger in the weeks since Bo found her, but she still looked impossibly small and fragile. When her eyes landed on Crowther, she went rigid with fear. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the man who hurt Mama." Crowther's face twisted with something ugly. "You should have died in that boxcar, you little wretch. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble." The words had barely left his mouth when Bo's fist connected with his jaw. Crowther went down hard, blood spraying from his split lip. Bo grabbed him by the collar and hauled him up, his other fist cocked for another blow. "Bo, no!" Nora's voice cut through the red haze of rage. "He's not worth it. Don't give him ammunition to use against you." Bo's arm trembled with the effort of restraint. Every fiber of his being wanted to beat Crowther into the dirt, to make him pay in blood for every life he'd destroyed. But Nora was right. The law had to handle this, not his fists. He shoved Crowther away with enough force to send the man stumbling. "Get on your horse and ride out of here. If I see you on my property again, I won't be so restrained." Crowther wiped blood from his mouth, his eyes glittering with malice. This isn't over. You've made a powerful enemy today, Kincaid. You made an enemy the day you hurt that child. Now get out before I forget my better nature. Crowther mounted his horse with as much dignity as he could muster, which wasn't much with blood dripping down his chin. You'll regret this, he promised. All of you. They watched him ride away, disappearing over the ridge. When he was finally out of sight, Bo turned to find Mara still frozen on the porch, her small body shaking. He climbed the steps and crouched before her, gentling his voice. He can't hurt you anymore, Mara. I promise you that. He said I should have died. Her voice was barely audible. He really wanted me to die. Some men are broken inside. They do terrible things because they've lost whatever it was that made them human. Bo took her trembling hands in his. But he doesn't get to win. We won't let him. Mara threw her arms around his neck, and Bo held her while she cried. Not the silent tears she'd shed before, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to tear themselves from her very soul. He let her cry it out, making no attempt to stop or soothe, understanding she needed this release. When her tears finally subsided, Nora brought her inside while Bo stood on the porch, his mind already racing ahead. Crowther would retaliate, that was certain. The man had too much at stake to simply accept defeat. The question was how and when. Nora emerged a few minutes later. She's lying down. Poor thing exhausted herself crying. We need to move fast, Bo said. Crowther knows we're on to him. He'll start covering his tracks, destroying evidence, maybe even running. Or he'll come after us directly. Nora's expression was grim. He's desperate now, Bo. Desperate men are dangerous. Then we don't give him the chance. I'm writing to the federal marshal's office tomorrow with everything we've collected. Crowther's confession about Mara being in the freight car, even if it was accidental, combined with the documentary evidence should be enough for an arrest warrant. What about Mara? We can't leave her here unprotected. She comes with us. You too. We all go to Cheyenne, stay there until Crowther's in custody. Bo's jaw set. I'm not giving him another shot at her. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Bo gathered all his evidence, the copied documents, his notes, Nora's testimony from the widows she'd interviewed. He cleaned and loaded his rifles, his revolvers, the weapons he'd sworn never to use again but kept maintained out of habit. That night, as darkness settled over the ranch, Bo took first watch. He sat on the porch with a rifle across his knees, listening to the night sounds of the valley. Somewhere an owl hooted, the wind rattled through bare branches. Normal sounds. Peaceful sounds. But Bo's instincts were screaming that danger was coming. He was right. The attack came 2 hours before dawn, when the night was at its darkest and coldest. Bo heard them before he saw them, the muffled sound of horses moving slowly, trying for stealth. 3 riders, maybe 4, approaching from different directions to surround the house. Bo moved quickly and quietly. He slipped inside and woke Nora with a hand over her mouth to keep her from crying out. We've got company, he whispered. Get Mara. There's a root cellar under the kitchen with a hidden exit that comes out in the barn. Take her there and wait for my signal. If shooting starts and you don't hear from me in 10 minutes, take the horses and ride for town. Don't stop. Don't look back. Nora's eyes were wide but steady. What are you going to do? What I do best. Now go. While Nora gathered Mara, Bo positioned himself at a window that gave him a view of the yard. The riders had stopped at the edge of the tree line, dark shapes against darker shadows. 4 men, all armed. Crowther wasn't among them. He'd hired his dirty work done, as men like him always did. Bo recognized the type immediately. Hired guns, the kind who'd kill for money without asking questions. Dangerous, but predictable. They'd try to burn him out first, force him into the open where they could shoot him down. Then they'd search the house for Mara and Nora. He wasn't going to let them get that far. Bo moved to the back door and slipped out into the darkness, using the shadows and his knowledge of his own land to circle around behind the gunmen. Years of tracking outlaws across the frontier had taught him how to move silently, how to use darkness as an ally. The hawk hadn't forgotten his skills. The first gunman never saw him coming. Bo materialized out of the shadows and brought his rifle butt down on the man's head with practiced precision. The gunman crumpled without a sound. 3 left. The second proved more alert. He heard Bo's approach and spun, clawing for his pistol. Bo shot him in the shoulder before he could clear leather, the gunshot shattering the night's silence. The man went down screaming. "He's behind us," one of the remaining gunmen shouted. "Spread out!" But spreading out in unfamiliar terrain in darkness was a mistake. Bo knew every tree, every rock, every depression in his land. He led them on a chase through the shadows, appearing long enough to fire a shot, then vanishing before they could return fire. It was what he used to do when hunting outlaws who outnumbered him, turn the tables, make them the prey instead of the predator. The third gunman made the mistake of stopping to reload. Bo took him down with a shot to the leg. The fourth finally broke and ran, abandoning his fallen comrades in his panic. Bo let him go. One man fleeing back to Crowther would deliver the message that this ranch was defended, that the old bounty hunter still had teeth. When silence fell again, Bo gathered the 3 downed gunmen, 2 wounded, 1 unconscious, and secured them with rope in the barn. Then he gave the signal for Nora and Mara to emerge from the root cellar. Mara's eyes were huge in the lamplight as she took in Bo, his clothes spattered with blood that wasn't his expression carved from stone. "Are they dead?" she asked. "No, just wish they were." Bo softened his voice. "Nobody's going to hurt you, Mara. I don't care how many men Crowther sends. They'll have to go through me first, and I'm harder to kill than I look." The reality of what he'd just done, and what it meant, settled over him as dawn broke. Crowther had escalated from threats to action, from legal maneuvering to attempted murder. The gloves were off now. This was war. Marshal Garrett arrived with a deputy by mid-morning, summoned by a rider Bo had sent at first light. The lawman surveyed the 3 prisoners with a mixture of respect and concern. "You didn't kill any of them," he observed. "Didn't need to. They're more useful alive. They can testify about who hired them." Bo handed over a leather wallet he'd found on one of the gunmen. "Found this. Payment receipt from Elias Crowther, dated yesterday. $500 for security services." Garrett examined the document with growing satisfaction. "This is good. Real good. Combined with everything else you've collected, this gives me enough to arrest Crowther for conspiracy to commit murder." He looked at Bo. "You and the girl will need to testify, and Miss Hale here for what she witnessed during the confrontation yesterday." "We'll testify," Bo confirmed, "but I want protection for Mara. Real protection, not just promises." "I'll assign 2 deputies to guard her and Miss Hale and Cheyenne while we bring Crowther in. You have my word." Garrett's expression turned grave. "But, Bo, you need to understand what you're up against. Crowther's got friends in high places. This trial is going to be ugly, and they'll come after you with everything they've got. Let them come. I've got the truth on my side, and that's more than they have." The journey to Cheyenne took 3 days, with Garrett and his men transporting the prisoners in a heavily guarded wagon. Bo, Nora, and Mara followed with additional protection from federal deputies. They saw no sign of pursuit, but Bo remained vigilant, his hand never far from his weapons. Mara rode in front of him, growing quieter as they drew closer to the territorial capital. The girl who'd begun to emerge from her shell over the past weeks had retreated again, walled up behind her defenses. "You scared?" Bo asked her on the second evening. "A little," she admitted. "What if they don't believe me? What if Mr. Crowther says I'm lying?" "Then we show them the evidence that proves you're telling the truth. Documents don't lie, Mara. Neither do facts." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "And you're not alone. I'll be right there with you every step of the way." She leaned back against his chest. "Promise?" "Promise." Cheyenne greeted them with the organized chaos of a territorial capital gearing up for a major trial. Word of Crowther's arrest had spread fast, igniting a firestorm of speculation and rumor. The man had been taken into custody the same day Garrett had arrived with his evidence and prisoners, and was now being held in the federal jail awaiting arraignment. Garrett secured rooms for Bo, Nora, and Mara in a boarding house near the courthouse, with deputies stationed outside for protection. The federal prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Aldridge, interviewed them separately and at length, preparing her case. "This is good work," Aldridge told Bo after reviewing his evidence. "Very thorough. Most civilians who try to investigate crimes make a mess of it, but you clearly knew what you were doing." "I used to hunt criminals for a living. Learned a few things along the way." "I can see that." Aldridge tapped the stack of documents. The forged signatures, the financial records, the pattern of deaths, it's damning. And with the hired gunmen willing to testify in exchange for reduced sentences, we can tie Crowther directly to the murder attempts. The defense will try to discredit the child's testimony, paint her as confused or coached, but the physical evidence supports her account. What are his chances? Bo asked bluntly. Of acquittal. Minimal, if the jury is fair, but there's no guarantee of that. Crowther's lawyers are already working to stack the jury with sympathetic members, businessmen who see land development as progress regardless of how it's achieved. Aldridge's expression hardened. We're going to have to fight for every inch of ground. The arraignment took place 2 days later. Bo sat in the crowded courtroom with Mara on one side and Nora on the other, watching as Elias Crowther was led in wearing shackles. The man had regained his composure, his expensive suit immaculate, his bearing confident. He scanned the courtroom and his eyes landed on Mara. For just an instant, naked hatred flashed across his face before the mask of respectability returned. Mara grabbed Bo's hand, her small fingers gripping tight. He's looking at me. He can look all he wants. He can't touch you. Bo returned Crowther's stare without blinking until the man looked away. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Harriet Blackwood, read the charges in a voice that carried authority. Elias Crowther, you stand accused of multiple counts of fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder of a minor child. How do you plead? Crowther's lawyer, a slick operator from Denver named Marcus Webb, stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. These charges are baseless persecution of an honest public servant by individuals with questionable motives. Save the theatrics for trial, Mr. Webb, Judge Blackwood said dryly. Bail? The prosecution requests the defendant be held without bail, Your Honor, Aldridge said. He has significant financial resources and connections across multiple territories. He poses a serious flight risk. Additionally, he has already attempted to harm the primary witness, an 8-year-old child. We believe he remains a danger to that witness and to anyone else who might testify against him. Webb objected strenuously, but Judge Blackwood sided with the prosecution. Crowther would remain in federal custody until trial. As he was led away, he turned to look at Bo one last time. You're a dead man walking, Kincaid, he said, loud enough to be heard. You and everyone you care about. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Judge Blackwood's gavel cracked like thunder. Mr. Crowther, one more outburst like that, and I'll add intimidation of witnesses to your charges. Remove him. But the damage was done. Mara was shaking against Bo's side, and even Nora looked pale. Crowther had meant for them to hear, had wanted them to understand that even from a jail cell, he could reach out and hurt them. That night back at the boarding house, Bo sat with Mara while she tried and failed to sleep. She kept starting awake, convinced she'd heard something, seen something. He said you're going to die, she whispered in the darkness. Because of me. Because you helped me. He said a lot of things. Doesn't make them true. Bo pulled a chair up beside her bed. Mara, I want you to listen to me. Men like Crowther, they use fear as a weapon. They make threats because they want you scared and off balance. But here's what they don't understand. Some people, when you threaten them, they don't run. They dig in and fight harder. Are you one of those people? Yeah, I am. He smiled grimly. And so are you, whether you know it or not. You survived being locked in a frozen freight car. You survived pneumonia and fever. You looked that man in the eye today and didn't flinch. That takes courage most adults don't have. I was scared, though. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what needs doing even though you're terrified. Bo reached out and brushed hair from her forehead. Your mama would be proud of you. I know I am. Mara's eyes filled with tears. I miss her so much. I know. I miss my Sarah too. Missing people we love never really goes away. But it gets easier to carry, I promise you that. She was quiet for a long moment. If something happened to you, I'd miss you too. The simple statement hit Bo harder than any of Crowther's threats. Somewhere along the way, without quite realizing it, he'd stopped being just a rescuer or a guardian. He'd become something more, something that felt dangerously close to being a father. Nothing's going to happen to me, he said gruffly. Now get some sleep. We've got a long fight ahead of us, and you need to be rested." The trial began 2 weeks later, and from the first gavel strike, it became clear this would be a battle. Webb attacked every piece of evidence, questioned every witness, tried to paint Crowther as a victim of circumstance and malicious prosecution. The widows who testified about losing their land were dismissed as confused, their grief making them unreliable. The forged signatures were explained away as natural variation in handwriting, but the hired gunmen proved harder to discredit. One by one, they took the stand and admitted they'd been paid by Crowther to kill Bo and anyone else at the ranch. Webb tried to argue they were lying to reduce their sentences, but their testimony was too consistent, too detailed. Then came the day Mara was scheduled to testify. Bo watched her walk to the witness stand looking impossibly small in the huge courtroom. She wore a simple dress Nora had made for her hair braided back neatly. Her face was pale but composed. Aldridge approached her gently. "Mara, can you tell the court what happened after your mother died?" In a clear, steady voice, Mara recounted the events. Her mother's illness, Crowther's arrival, waking up locked in the freight car. The cold, the hunger, the terror. And through it all, she never wavered, never broke down, just told the truth, in simple, devastating detail. Webb's cross-examination was brutal. He tried to confuse her, to make her contradict herself, to suggest she'd been coached or was misremembering. But Mara held firm, answering each question with the same unwavering honesty that had characterized her testimony. "Isn't it true that you were very sick when Mr. Kincaid found you?" Webb asked. "Delirious with fever?" "Yes, sir." "So it's possible you were confused about what happened, that in your fevered state you imagined things that didn't actually occur?" "No, sir. I remember everything." "How can you be so certain?" Mara looked Webb straight in the eye. "Because when someone tries to kill you, you don't forget. Not ever." The courtroom went absolutely silent. Even Webb seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Then Mara turned to point at Crowther. "That's the man who locked me in the train car. He told me nobody wanted me, that I was nobody's problem. Then he locked the door and left me there to freeze. I remember his face. I remember his voice. And I remember thinking I was going to die alone." Her voice didn't waver. "He tried to kill me. And now he's trying to make everyone think I'm lying, but I'm not." Webb had no more questions. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When the jury returned on the afternoon of the third day, the courtroom was packed to capacity. Bo sat with his arm around Mara's shoulders, feeling her tremble despite her brave face. Nora gripped his other hand so tightly his fingers went numb. They'd come so far, fought so hard. Now everything hung on the decision of 12 strangers. Judge Blackwood entered and the room fell silent. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman, a weathered rancher with honest eyes, stood. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of fraud in the first degree, how do you find?" "Guilty." A ripple of reaction swept through the courtroom. Crowther's face went white, then red with fury. Webb was already on his feet, objecting, but the foreman continued reading verdicts. Guilty on all counts of forgery. Guilty on conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty on attempted murder of a minor child. When the last guilty verdict was read, Mara collapsed against Bo's chest, her whole body shaking with sobs of relief. Nora was crying too, and Bo found his own eyes burning as he held them both. "Order," Judge Blackwood commanded, though her own expression showed satisfaction. "Mr. Crowther, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers. Sentencing will take place 1 week from today. Until then, you will remain in federal custody. Bailiff, remove the prisoner." As Crowther was led away in chains, he twisted to look back at them one final time. The mask of respectability had completely shattered, revealing the monster beneath. "This isn't finished," he snarled. "I'll see you all in hell before this is over." 2 deputies moved to block his view of Mara, and he was dragged from the courtroom still spitting threats and curses. But they were empty words now, the rage of a beaten man. Outside the courthouse, Catherine Aldridge found them on the steps. "Congratulations. That was a hard-fought victory." "When will he be sentenced?" Bo asked. 1 week, as the judge said. "Given the severity of the crimes and the number of victims, I expect she'll give him the maximum, 20 years in federal prison at minimum, possibly life." Aldridge's expression turned serious. "But the fight's not entirely over. Webb has already filed notice of appeal, and Crowther still has powerful friends. They'll try to get the conviction overturned on technical grounds. How long will that take? Months, possibly years. But in the meantime, Crowther stays in prison. And honestly, the evidence against him is so overwhelming that I doubt any appeals court will overturn the verdict. She smiled at Mara. You were incredibly brave up there. You should be proud of yourself. Mara managed a small smile. Thank you, ma'am. That evening, back at the boarding house, they celebrated quietly. Nora produced a cake she'd somehow managed to bake in the boarding house kitchen, and they ate it while Mara told them about the nice bailiff who'd brought her water during the trial, and the way Judge Blackwood had smiled at her when she left the witness stand. But beneath the relief, Bo felt unsettled. Something about Crowther's final threats nagged at him. The man had resources, connections, allies who'd benefit from his freedom. Would they really let him rot in prison without trying to extract him? He kept his concerns to himself, not wanting to darken Mara's first night of peace in weeks. Let her have this moment of safety. Tomorrow he could worry about what came next. The next morning brought unexpected news. Marshal Garrett arrived at the boarding house with a telegram in hand, his expression grave. What is it? Bo asked, stepping onto the porch to speak privately. County officials have been going through Crowther's records. They found something you need to know about. Garrett handed over the telegram. Crowther kept ledgers, detailed records of every property he stole, every person he killed or had killed, every payoff he made to corrupt officials. Looks like he was either planning to use them as leverage someday, or was just too arrogant to destroy the evidence. Bo scanned the telegram, his blood running cold as he read the names. 11 homesteaders dead, 17 properties stolen. And among the victims was a name that made his heart stop. Sarah Kincaid. No, he whispered. That's not possible. Garrett's face was full of sympathy. According to his ledgers, Crowther poisoned your wife 3 years ago, made it look like natural illness. He wanted your ranch even back then, but you wouldn't sell. So he thought removing Sarah might soften you up, make you more willing to leave. The world tilted. Bo gripped the porch railing to keep from falling. Sarah. His Sarah, who'd died in his arms coughing blood, who'd wasted away over 3 terrible weeks while he'd watched helplessly. He'd thought it was consumption, some cruel twist of fate, but it had been murder, calculated, cold-blooded murder. Bo, Garrett's hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry, I know this is... Where's the ledger? Bo's voice came out flat, dead. I want to see it. It's evidence. It'll be presented at sentencing. I want to see it now. Garrett studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. All right, come with me. At the federal building, Garrett led Bo to a secure room where Crowther's confiscated possessions were being cataloged. The ledger was thick, bound in leather, filled with neat handwriting that detailed years of crime with businessmen's precision. Bo found the entry about Sarah and read it 3 times, each word burning into his brain like a brand. The date of her poisoning, the amount Crowther had paid his accomplice, a traveling medicine show doctor who'd administered the poison disguised as tonic, the notation that the plan had failed because Bo had refused to sell even after her death. Failed, Bo said aloud, his voice shaking. He killed my wife and it was a failed plan to him, just a business setback. Bo, I know what you're thinking, don't. Garrett's voice was firm. He's going to prison for the rest of his life. That's justice. Don't throw away everything you've built, everything you've become, for revenge. But Bo barely heard him. The rage that had been building since he'd found Mara in that freight car, that he'd kept carefully controlled and channeled into legal action, now threatened to consume him entirely. Sarah was dead because of Crowther. 3 years of grief, of emptiness, of barely surviving, all because one man had wanted his land. He stood so abruptly, his chair fell over. I need air. Outside, Bo walked blindly through Cheyenne's streets, not seeing the buildings or the people. His mind was full of Sarah's face, her laugh, the way she'd smiled at him even as the poison ate away at her from inside. She'd died thinking it was just bad luck, never knowing someone had murdered her for profit. He found himself at the federal jail where Crowther was being held. The building was heavily guarded, But Bo had his federal warrant and a reputation that made the guards nervous. They let him pass with only minimal questions. Crowther was in a cell at the end of the corridor, sitting on a narrow cot and reading a law book his expensive lawyers had brought him. He looked up when Bo appeared, and something like satisfaction crossed his face. "Come to gloat, Kincaid?" "You killed Sarah." The words came out hoarse. "My wife. You poisoned her." "Did I?" Crowther set aside his book. "I'd have to check my records. I've ended so many lives over the years, they tend to blur together." Bo's hands gripped the cell bars so hard they creaked. "She never did anything to you. She was innocent. She was in the way, just like that brat of a girl was in the way, just like you're in the way." Crowther stood and approached the bars, close enough that Bo could see the madness lurking in his eyes. "You think you've won something? You think justice means anything? I have friends who'll have me out of here within a year. And when I'm free, I'm going to finish what I started. The child will die screaming, and you'll watch before I kill you too." The cell door wasn't locked. The guards had been opening it to deliver meals. Bo could pull it open, could wrap his hands around Crowther's throat, and squeeze until the life left those mad eyes. Every instinct screamed at him to do exactly that. Instead, he stepped back from the bars. "You're already in hell," Bo said quietly. "You just don't know it yet. 20 years in a cage, maybe more. Every day waking up knowing you lost everything. Your money, your power, your freedom. You'll die in prison, forgotten and alone. And me? I'll raise that girl you tried to kill. I'll watch her grow up strong and happy. I'll give her the life you tried to steal. That's my revenge, Crowther, living well while you rot." He turned and walked away, leaving Crowther shouting threats at his back. Outside the jail, Bo leaned against the wall and breathed deep, fighting for control. The rage was still there, would probably always be there, but he wouldn't let it define him, wouldn't let Crowther win by turning him into a killer. When he returned to the boarding house, Nora took one look at his face and knew. "Garrett told you about Sarah." "Yeah." "I'm sorry, Bo. I know that doesn't help, but I am. Doesn't change anything. She's still gone, and no amount of revenge will bring her back." Bo sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "But I went to see him, Crowther. Thought maybe I don't know what I thought, that it would help somehow." "Did it?" "No, yes. Maybe." He rubbed his face. "I wanted to kill him, Nora. Wanted it so badly I could taste it. But I didn't. For Sarah, for Mara, for myself. I didn't." Nora knelt beside his chair and took his hands. "Sarah would be proud of you. For finding Mara, for bringing Crowther to justice, for choosing to be better than him. She always said you were the best man she'd ever known. Looks like she was right." That night, Mara woke from a nightmare screaming. Bo reached her first, gathering her up as she fought against invisible enemies. "It's okay. It's me. You're safe," he murmured over and over until she stopped struggling and collapsed against him, crying. "I dreamed Mr. Crowther got out of jail," she sobbed, "that he came and took me away again. That's not going to happen. He's locked up tight, and he's going to stay that way for the rest of his life." Bo held her close. "Nothing and nobody is going to take you away from me, Mara. I promise you that." "But what if his friends help him escape? What if—" "Then I'll stop them. I'll always stop them." He pulled back to look at her tear-stained face. "Listen to me. I failed to protect someone I loved once. I won't make that mistake again. You're my family now, and I protect my family." "Am I really?" Her voice was so small. "Your family?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Bo had been dancing around it for weeks, calling her family in abstract terms, but never making it concrete. Maybe because he was afraid. Afraid of replacing Sarah, afraid of failing another person he cared about, afraid of admitting how much this little girl had come to mean to him. But fear was just another form of cowardice. "Yeah," he said firmly, "you really are. And I've been thinking, after all this is settled, after we go home, I want to make it legal. I want to adopt you, proper and official. Make you a Kincaid for real, if that's something you'd want." Mara stared at him, her eyes huge. "You mean it? You'd really want me to be your daughter?" "More than anything." And as he said it, Bo realized it was absolutely true. Somewhere in the past weeks of caring for her, protecting her, watching her heal and grow, she'd stopped being Sarah's niece or a rescued child. She'd become his. So what do you say? Want to be Mara Kincaid? She threw her arms around his neck and held on like she'd never let go. Yes, 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 yes. Over her shoulder, Bo saw Nora in the doorway, tears streaming down her face and a smile of pure joy on her lips. She nodded at him, Sarah's gesture of approval, and Bo felt something settle in his chest, a rightness he hadn't felt since Sarah died. The sentencing hearing took place exactly 1 week after the verdict. Judge Blackwood surveyed the packed courtroom with stern authority before reading Crowther's fate. Elias Crowther, you have been found guilty of crimes that demonstrate a shocking disregard for human life and the rule of law. You murdered innocent people for financial gain. You stole land from widows and orphans. You attempted to kill a child by abandoning her to die of exposure. These crimes are among the most serious this court has ever encountered. Crowther stood rigid, his lawyer beside him, as the judge continued. The prosecution has presented evidence of at least 11 murders committed by you or at your direction over a period of 5 years. While we cannot try you for all of these crimes in this proceeding, this court takes them into account when determining an appropriate sentence. Judge Blackwood's eyes were cold as winter steel. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Additionally, all properties and assets acquired through your criminal enterprise are hereby forfeited to the territorial government, to be returned to the rightful heirs or sold with proceeds going to the victims' families. You will be transferred to the federal penitentiary in Kansas within the month, where you will remain for the rest of your natural life. The gavel came down with finality. Crowther's face went from white to red to purple as the sentence sank in. He lunged across the defense table, screaming incoherently, and had to be subdued by 4 bailiffs. His shouts echoed through the courthouse as he was dragged away. "Life in prison," Mara whispered, gripping Bo's hand. "He can't ever hurt anyone again." "No," Bo agreed. "He can't." But the day's revelations weren't finished. After the sentencing, Aldridge approached them with documents in hand. "There's one more thing you should know. As part of the asset forfeiture, the territorial government has been reviewing all of Crowther's holdings. Your late wife's ranch, the property he tried to acquire through her murder, has been officially cleared of any claims. Additionally, Anna Whitlock's homestead in Montana has been restored to her estate. As Mara's legal guardian, you'll have the right to manage it until she comes of age." Bo took the papers, scanning them with disbelief. "Sarah's ranch is clear?" "Completely. Any documents Crowther filed claiming interest in the property have been declared fraudulent and void. It's yours, free and clear." Aldridge smiled. "There's more. The territorial governor has announced a special fund to compensate victims of Crowther's crimes. You and Mara are eligible for compensation based on your losses and suffering." "We don't need charity," Bo started, but Aldridge cut him off. "It's not charity. It's justice. Your wife was murdered. Mara's mother was murdered, and she was nearly killed herself. You both deserve compensation for what was taken from you." She handed him another document. "The amount has been set at $10,000. It's yours to accept or refuse." $10,000. More money than Bo had ever seen at once. Enough to expand the ranch, to secure Mara's future, to build something lasting. "We'll accept," he said quietly, "for Mara's education and future. She deserves every opportunity." Nora had been standing quietly, but now she spoke up. "There's something else we should discuss. Anna's homestead in Montana. Bo, you can't manage 2 properties separated by hundreds of miles. You're going to need help." "What are you suggesting?" "Let me and John take over Anna's place. We'll run it, build it up, make sure it's prosperous. When Mara comes of age, she can decide if she wants to keep it or sell it. But in the meantime, it shouldn't sit empty." Nora's expression was earnest. "Anna was my sister. I want to honor her memory by making sure her land thrives." Bo looked at Mara. "What do you think? It's your mother's land." Mara was quiet for a moment. "Mama loved that place. She'd want it to be lived in, taken care of. If Aunt Nora and Uncle John want to do that, I think Mama would be happy." "Then it's settled." Bo extended his hand to Nora. "The Montana property is yours to manage. We'll draw up proper papers, make sure everything's legal and clear." The pieces were falling into place. Justice served, family secured, future planned. But there was one more thing Bo needed to do. The following week, before they left Cheyenne to return home, Bo took Mara to the federal courthouse. Judge Blackwood had agreed to conduct the adoption proceeding personally, saying she wanted to see something good come from the darkness of Crowther's trial. The courtroom was nearly empty this time, just Bo, Mara, Nora, and her husband John, Marshall Garrett, and Catherine Aldridge as witnesses. Judge Blackwood smiled down at them from the bench, her stern demeanor softening. "We're gathered today for a much happier occasion than our last meeting," she began. "Mr. Kincaid, you've petitioned this court to legally adopt Mara Whitlock as your daughter. I've reviewed your petition and the supporting documents. I've also taken the liberty of interviewing Marshall Garrett and Mrs. Hale about your character and fitness as a guardian." Bo's heart pounded. He hadn't expected that level of scrutiny. "Their testimony was unequivocal," the judge continued. "They described you as a man of integrity, who risked his own life to protect this child and bring her mother's killer to justice. They believe you will provide a loving, stable home for her." She looked at Mara. "Young lady, do you understand what adoption means?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mara said clearly. "It means Mr. Kincaid becomes my legal father, that I become his real daughter. And is this what you want?" "More than anything." Judge Blackwood nodded. "Mr. Kincaid, do you swear to love, protect, and provide for this child as your own daughter for the rest of your life?" "I do." Bo's voice was rough with emotion. "Then by the power vested in me by the Wyoming Territory, I hereby grant this petition. Mara Whitlock is now legally Mara Kincaid, daughter of Bo Kincaid. May you both find happiness and healing together." The gavel came down gently. "Congratulations." Mara launched herself at Bo, wrapping her arms around him and crying happy tears. Bo held her close, his own eyes burning, aware that he'd just been given a gift he didn't deserve, but would spend the rest of his life earning. Nora was crying openly, and even Garrett looked suspiciously misty-eyed. Aldridge produced adoption papers for them to sign, making everything official. When it was done, when all the papers were filed and witnessed, Judge Blackwood called them back. "There's one more thing, a tradition in my family for important occasions." She produced a small brand from her desk, the letter K wrought in iron. "This belonged to my late husband's ranch. I'd like you to have it, for your family brand. Let it mark the beginning of the Kincaid legacy." Bo took the brand, feeling its weight. "Thank you, Your Honor. We'll use it with pride." Outside the courthouse, Mara looked up at him with shining eyes. "Can we really use the brand? Like on the horses?" "On the horses, on the cattle, on anything that belongs to us." An idea struck him. "In fact, when we get home, we'll have a ceremony. You'll brand your first colt yourself, make it official." "Really? I can do it?" "You're a Kincaid now. Kincaids brand their own stock." The ride home took 5 days, but it felt like a journey into a new life. Everything looked different somehow, brighter, more full of possibility. Bo found himself making plans, thinking about the future in ways he hadn't since Sarah died. They'd expand the horse breeding program, maybe add more cattle. He'd teach Mara to ride properly, to rope, to handle a ranch. They'd make Sarah's dream of a thriving homestead a reality. When they finally crested the ridge and saw the ranch below, Mara gasped. "It's beautiful. I never really looked at it before, but it's really beautiful." "It's home," Bo said simply. "Our home." They rode down into the valley as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Smoke rose from the chimney. John had ridden ahead to prepare the house, and lights glowed in the windows like a welcome. That night, after Mara had fallen asleep in her room, Bo sat on the porch looking at the stars. He thought about Sarah, about Anna, about all the lives Crowther had destroyed. The man would rot in prison now, would spend decades contemplating his crimes. It should have felt like enough. But what felt like enough was this: the quiet house behind him, the sleeping child who now carried his name, the future stretching ahead full of ordinary days and small moments. That was the real victory. Not Crowther's imprisonment, but the life they'd build in spite of him. The door opened and Mara padded out in her nightgown, carrying a blanket. Couldn't sleep? Just thinking. Come here. She curled up beside him on the porch swing, and Bo wrapped the blanket around them both. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Papa? Mara's voice was tentative, testing out the new word. Bo's chest tightened. Yeah, sweetheart? Thank you for finding me, for keeping me, for making me yours. Thank you for letting me, he said softly. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. A reason to wake up in the morning. A reason to build instead of just survive. She snuggled closer. We saved each other, didn't we? Yeah, Bo agreed, his arm tightening around her. I guess we did. Tomorrow they'd start the work of building their life together. There would be challenges ahead, hard days and difficult moments. But tonight, under the vast Wyoming sky, Bo Kincaid held his daughter and felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 long years. He felt peace. The branding ceremony took place 3 days after their return, on a crisp morning when the sun painted the mountains gold and the air smelled of pine and possibility. Bo had spent the previous evening preparing, heating the brand Judge Blackwood had given them until the iron glowed red hot, explaining to Mara exactly how the process worked and why it mattered. A brand is more than just a mark, he told her as they sat by the forge. It's a promise. It says this animal belongs to us, that we'll care for it, protect it, give it the best life we can. When you put the Kincaid brand on that colt tomorrow, you're making that promise. Now, standing in the corral with the young chestnut colt nickering nervously nearby, Mara looked smaller than ever. But her jaw was set with determination, and when Bo handed her the heated brand, her hands didn't shake. Right there on the left hindquarter, Bo instructed, steadying the colt with gentle hands. Firm and quick. Don't hesitate. Mara stepped forward, the brand held carefully, and pressed it against the colt's hide. The animal flinched, but Bo's grip kept him steady, and within seconds it was done. The letter K stood out clearly, marking the colt as theirs. I did it, Mara breathed, stepping back and staring at her handiwork. I really did it. You sure did. Bo released the colt, who trotted off with an indignant snort. That's the first horse you've branded, but it won't be the last. Before you're grown, you'll know every animal on this ranch by sight and name. Nora and John, who'd stayed to witness the ceremony before heading to Montana, applauded from the fence rail. Well done, Mara, Nora called. Your mama would be so proud of you. The mention of Anna brought a flicker of sadness to Mara's face, but it passed quickly. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it no longer consumed her. She was learning to carry it alongside the new joy she'd found. That afternoon, as Nora and John prepared to leave for Montana, there were tearful goodbyes and promises to visit often. Mara clung to her aunt for a long moment. Take care of Mama's place, she whispered. Make it beautiful again. I will, Nora promised. And you take care of your papa. He needs you more than he knows. After they'd ridden away, Bo and Mara stood in the yard watching until they disappeared over the ridge. Then Mara took Bo's hand, something she did more often now, and squeezed it. It's just us now, she said. Just us, Bo agreed. That all right with you? More than all right. The weeks turned into months, and they settled into the rhythm of ranch life. Bo taught Mara everything he knew about horses, cattle, and the land. She proved to be a quick learner with a natural affinity for animals. The skittish colt she'd branded became her special project, and she worked with him daily until he'd follow her around the corral like a devoted dog. What are you going to name him? Bo asked one evening as they watched her put the colt through his paces. Phoenix, Mara said without hesitation, because we both rose from the ashes. The simple wisdom of it struck Bo silent. This child who'd been through hell and survived with her spirit intact never ceased to amaze him. Spring arrived with explosive color, carpeting the valley in wildflowers and new grass. Bo expanded the horse herd, adding 3 mares he purchased with part of the compensation money. The rest he put in a bank account for Mara's education, determined that she'd have choices he'd never had. Marshal Garrett visited in late April with news from Cheyenne. Thought you'd want to know. Crowther's appeals have all been denied. The Territorial Supreme Court upheld the conviction unanimously. He's been transferred to Kansas as planned. Life sentence, no possibility of parole. How'd he take it? Bo asked, though he wasn't sure he cared. Badly. He's still making threats, still claiming he'll escape and get revenge, but they've got him in maximum security. He's not going anywhere except a grave eventually. Garrett paused. There's something else. Several of the other victims' families have filed civil suits against Crowther's estate. They're going to recover damages from his seized assets. Your name came up. They wanted to know if you'd be joining the suit. Bo shook his head. We got what we needed. Let the others have their share. Some of them lost more than we did. You're a better man than most, Kincaid. Garrett tipped his hat. I'll let them know. After the marshal left, Bo found Mara in the barn, brushing Phoenix. She looked up when he entered, and he could see the question in her eyes. Crowther's appeals failed, he told her. He's going to stay in prison for the rest of his life. She was quiet for a moment, her hand stilling on the brush. Good. He can't hurt anyone else now. No, he can't. Bo leaned against the stall door. How do you feel about it? Really? Mara considered the question with the seriousness she brought to everything. I'm glad he can't escape. Glad he has to live knowing he lost. But mostly, I don't think about him anymore. Is that bad? Should I want more revenge or something? No, sweetheart. That's the healthiest thing you could say. Bo smiled. Revenge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The best thing you can do is live a good life in spite of what he did. Show him that he couldn't break you. Then that's what I'll do. She returned to brushing Phoenix. I'll live so well he'll know he failed. Summer brought prosperity to the ranch. The horses Bo had bred were gaining a reputation for quality across 3 territories, and buyers came from as far as Colorado to purchase them. Mara proved invaluable during sales, her natural warmth and enthusiasm convincing even the most skeptical buyers. You've got a gift, Bo told her after she'd helped close a particularly difficult sale. That man was ready to walk away until you showed him how gentle that mare was with you. She is gentle, Mara protested. I just let him see what was already true. That's the gift, seeing the truth and helping others see it too. They hired a ranch hand that summer, a quiet young man named Thomas who'd lost his own family to illness and understood loss without needing it, explained. He worked hard, respected Mara's growing authority over the horse program, and quickly became part of their small family. On Mara's 9th birthday in August, Bo threw her a party unlike anything the valley had seen. He invited neighboring ranchers and their families, set up games and competitions, barbecued beef and venison. Mara wore a new dress Nora had sent from Montana, and her hair was braided with blue ribbons. I can't believe you did all this for me, she said, her eyes shining as she looked at the gathered crowd. You're worth celebrating, Bo said simply. Every day with you is worth celebrating. The birthday gift he gave her was a saddle of her own, custom made to fit her small frame, with her initials tooled into the leather. M.K. Mara Kincaid. She traced the letters with trembling fingers. It's perfect, she whispered. Thank you, Papa. That night, after the guests had gone and the ranch had returned to quiet, they sat on the porch as had become their habit. Mara was drowsy from excitement and cake, her head resting against Bo's shoulder. Papa, she murmured, do you think Mama and Aunt Sarah are watching us? From heaven or wherever people go? I do, Bo said. And I think they're proud of us, of how we've healed, how we've built something good from all that pain. I hope so. I don't want them to think I've forgotten them just because I'm happy now. Being happy doesn't mean forgetting. It means honoring their memory by living the life they'd want for you. Bo kissed the top of her head. They'd want you happy, Mara. I'm sure of it. The years began to pass with the steady rhythm of seasons. Mara grew taller, stronger, more confident. She learned to rope and ride like she'd been born to it, to doctor sick animals and assist with difficult births. She attended the small schoolhouse in town when weather permitted, proving herself the brightest student the teacher had seen in years. By her 12th birthday, she was essentially running the horse breeding program herself, with Bo providing guidance but letting her make most decisions. The ranch had expanded to 3 times its original size, prosperous enough to employ 4 full-time hands and several seasonal workers. Nora and John visited regularly, bringing news of Anna's Montana homestead, which they'd transformed into a thriving cattle operation. They'd started a college fund for Mara from the profits, insisting she'd earned it through her mother's sacrifice. She should go to one of those Eastern schools, Nora said during one visit. Learn business, maybe law. She's got the mind for it. She can do whatever she wants, Bo said, though I'll admit the thought of her leaving for school terrifies me. She'll come back, Nora said with certainty. This ranch is in her blood now, same as it was in Sarah's. She'll go out into the world, but she'll always come home. When Mara turned 16, word came that changed everything. Elias Crowther was dead. He'd suffered a heart attack in his prison cell in Kansas, dying alone and unmourned. The warden's letter was brief and factual, with no emotion wasted on the deceased. Bo read the letter twice before showing it to Mara. She was in the corral working with a new colt, Phoenix's offspring, continuing the line she'd started years ago. When he told her, she stopped working and stood very still. How do I feel about this? She asked finally. I don't feel glad, but I don't feel sad either. You feel relieved, Bo said. That's normal. He can't threaten us anymore, not even from prison. That door is finally closed. Should we go to the funeral? There won't be one. He'll be buried in the prison cemetery with no ceremony. The warden was very clear about that. Mara nodded slowly. Then it's over. Really, truly over. Yeah, it is. She turned back to the colt, her hand steady on the lead rope. Good. I've got work to do. Watching her return to training with complete focus, Bo felt a surge of pride so fierce it nearly overwhelmed him. This girl who'd been abandoned to die had become a young woman of incredible strength and grace. Sarah would have loved her. Anna would have been so proud. That evening, Mara came to him with a request. I want to visit Mama's grave in Montana. I don't think I'm ready yet, but soon. Will you come with me? Of course. Whenever you're ready, we'll go together. They made the journey in early fall when the aspens turned gold and the air carried the first hint of winter. Anna's grave was on the Montana homestead, marked by a simple stone that Nora and John had erected. The plot was well tended, surrounded by wildflowers. Mara stood before her mother's grave for a long time without speaking. Bo waited a respectful distance away, giving her privacy for this final goodbye. Hi, Mama, Mara said finally, her voice soft. I'm sorry it took me so long to visit. I was scared, I think. Scared that coming here would make it all fresh again. All that grief. She knelt and touched the stone. But I'm okay now. Better than okay. Papa, Bo, I mean, though I call him Papa now, he took such good care of me. He gave me a home, a family, a future. Everything you wanted for me. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice stayed steady. I forgive you for dying, Mama. I know that sounds silly, but I was so angry at you for leaving me. But I understand now. You didn't choose it. You fought to stay as long as you could, and you made sure I'd have someone to go to, even if the journey was harder than you planned. She pulled something from her pocket, a photograph Bo had taken of her with Phoenix, both of them looking strong and healthy. This is me now, almost 17. I look like you, people say. I hope that's true. I hope I have your strength and kindness. She placed the photograph against the stone. I'm going to college next year, Eastern school studying business, but I'll come back to the ranch. It's my home. And someday, when I have children of my own, I'll tell them about you, about how brave you were, how much you loved me. You'll live on through the stories. Bo had to turn away, his own eyes burning. The girl who'd been too damaged to cry properly had grown into a woman who could grieve honestly and heal completely. When Mara finally stood and walked back to him, her face was peaceful despite the tears. Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for letting me be part of this. He pulled her into a hug. Your mama would be so proud of the woman you've become. I hope so. I hope both our mamas are proud. They visited Sarah's grave on the way home, and Mara placed wildflowers on the stone while Bo stood with his hat in his hands. Aunt Sarah, Mara said to the grave, I never got to know you, but Papa talks about you sometimes. How kind you were, how strong, how much you loved this land and dreamed of filling it with family. She glanced at Bo. I think we're making your dream come true. The ranch is thriving. Papa's happy, really happy, not just pretending. And I'm here, carrying on what you started. Thank you for marrying him. Thank you for leading him to me, even though it took tragedy to make it happen." That night, in their hotel room in Cheyenne, Mara brought up something that had clearly been on her mind. "Papa, have you thought about marrying again? I'm almost grown. You'll be alone soon." Bo was startled by the question. "I'm not looking for that. I've got the ranch, got you, got a good life. That's enough. But when I go to college, you're coming back. You said so yourself. And even if you didn't, I'd still have a full life. I've got friends, work, purpose." He smiled at her. "You gave me all that, Mara. You saved me from becoming a bitter old man who died alone in an empty house. I don't need romance to be complete. I just need to know you're out there somewhere, living your best life. Promise you won't be lonely?" "I promise." "And you promise you'll visit, write letters, tell me about your adventures?" "Every week. I promise." Mara did go to college, enrolling at a women's business academy in Chicago. The day Bo put her on the train, he thought his heart might break from pride and sorrow, mixed together. She looked so grown up in her traveling suit, her hair pinned up beneath a fashionable hat. "I'll be back for Christmas," she promised, hugging him fiercely. "And summers, and any other time you need me." "I'll always need you," Bo said gruffly, "but I'm so damn proud of you for going, for being brave enough to chase your dreams. You taught me that. You taught me that surviving isn't enough. You have to live." She wrote faithfully, long letters full of her studies and new experiences. She excelled in her classes, made friends, attended lectures by famous businesswomen and suffragettes, but every letter ended the same way. "I miss the ranch. I miss home. I miss you, Papa." True to her word, she came home for Christmas, bursting with stories and ideas. She'd learned new accounting methods that could streamline the ranch's finances, marketing strategies that could expand their horse sales across the country. Bo listened with genuine interest and implemented many of her suggestions. "You're going to revolutionize this operation," he told her proudly. "We're going to," she corrected. "Together. Always together." The pattern repeated for 4 years. Mara studying in Chicago during the school year, returning home for breaks to work on the ranch and reconnect with the land she loved. She graduated with honors at 21, returning home permanently with a business degree and plans to modernize every aspect of the ranch operation. Under her management, the Kincaid Ranch became one of the most successful in Wyoming territory. They bred championship horses, pioneered new cattle feeding techniques, and established a reputation for fair dealing and quality stock that extended across the West. But success wasn't what mattered most to Bo. What mattered was watching Mara grow into a brilliant, compassionate woman who never forgot where she came from or what she'd survived. She was courted by several local men, but she was selective, refusing to settle for anything less than a partnership built on mutual respect. When she finally married at 24, it was to a veterinarian named James Halstead, who shared her love of horses and treated her as an equal partner in all things. The wedding was held at the ranch, with half the territory in attendance. Nora and John came from Montana, Marshall Garrett traveled from Cheyenne, even Judge Blackwood made the journey to see the child she'd helped become a woman. As Bo walked Mara down the aisle toward her waiting groom, she whispered, "Thank you, Papa, for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for making me who I am." "You made yourself," he whispered back. "I just had the privilege of watching." The grandchildren arrived in due course. First one, then another, then twins. Bo became Grandpa Bo, a role he embraced with unexpected enthusiasm. He taught them to ride, to respect the land, to understand that family was everything. They called the ranch home, running wild through the same valleys where their mother had healed from her childhood trauma. Mara and James built a house on the ranch, close enough to the original homestead that Bo could walk over for dinner most evenings. The three of them ran the ranch together, with the grandchildren underfoot, learning the business from the ground up. On his 70th birthday, Bo sat on the porch of the house he'd shared with Sarah, then with Mara, watching his grandchildren play in the yard. The ranch sprawled around him, prosperous and thriving. The mountains rose eternal in the distance, snow-capped and magnificent. Mara came to sit beside him, her hair showing the first threads of silver, though she was only in her 30s. "Penny for your thoughts?" "Just thinking about how far we've come. That scared little girl in the freight car, the broken man who found her. Look at us now. Look at what we built, Mara corrected gently. This ranch, this family, this life. We built it together, from ashes and grief and love. Your mama would be proud. Both of them would be. She took his weathered hand in hers. Papa, I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant again. Number 5. Bo laughed, a sound of pure joy. 5 grandchildren. I'm a wealthy man. The wealthiest, she agreed, and they'll all carry the Kincaid name, the brand, the legacy. What you started will go on for generations. As the years continued to pass, Bo began to slow down. His joints ached in the mornings, his breath came shorter after exertion. He was in his late 70s now, ancient by frontier standards, and he knew his time was growing short. But he wasn't afraid. How could he be, surrounded by the family he'd built, the legacy he'd created? Every grandchild bore some echo of Sarah's smile, Anna's determination, his own stubbornness. They were his immortality, walking and breathing proof that love could triumph over tragedy. On a clear autumn morning when he was 78, Bo woke knowing something was different. His chest felt tight, his heartbeat irregular. This was it then, the final goodbye. He dressed carefully and walked out to the porch, where he'd spent so many evenings with Mara over the years. The sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Beautiful. Perfect. Mara found him there an hour later, sitting peacefully in his chair with his eyes closed. She knew immediately, and her cry brought James and the children running. But when she touched his hand, still warm, she found a letter tucked into his pocket, her name on the envelope in his familiar scrawl. Through tears, she read his final words. My dearest Mara, if you're reading this, I've gone on ahead. Don't grieve too long, sweetheart. I've lived more fully in the years since I found you than in all the decades before. You gave me purpose when I had none. You gave me joy when I thought I'd never feel it again. You gave me a reason to be better than I was. I found you in that freight car marked no one's child, but you were never nobody's. You were mine from that first moment, even though it took me time to accept it. You were Sarah's legacy, Anna's daughter, and my salvation all wrapped up in one small, fierce package. You saved me just as surely as I saved you. Never forget that. The ranch is yours now, as it was always meant to be. Run it with the same wisdom and compassion you've shown all your life. Teach your children what I taught you, that family is everything, that honor matters, that choosing to build rather than destroy is the highest calling. I'll be waiting for you on the other side, along with your mama and Aunt Sarah. We'll all be watching, cheering you on, proud beyond measure of the woman you've become and the family you've built. Thank you for letting me be your father. It was the greatest privilege of my life. With all my love, Papa Mara pressed the letter to her chest and wept. But they were clean tears, honest grief without bitterness or regret. Her father had lived a full life and died peacefully, surrounded by love. What more could anyone ask? They buried him beside Sarah on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a stone that read simply, Bo Kincaid, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He saved a child and she saved him back. The funeral drew people from across 3 territories, ranchers he'd dealt with fairly, lawmen who remembered his time as the Hawk, victims of Crowther's crimes whose lives he'd helped piece back together. They came to honor a man who'd lived with integrity and died with his legacy secure. After everyone had left and night had fallen, Mara stood alone at the grave with her eldest daughter, a girl of 12 who bore Sarah's name and Anna's fierce spirit. Tell me about great-grandpa, young Sarah asked. Tell me the whole story. So Mara did. She told about the frozen freight car, the note that said, no one's child, the broken man who'd chosen to care anyway. She told about the trial, the danger, the victory. She told about learning to ride and brand and run a ranch. She told about becoming a family, about choosing love over bitterness, about building something beautiful from tragedy. And now we carry it forward, Mara finished. All of us. Every Kincaid who comes after carries the responsibility to honor what he started. To be brave, to be kind, to protect those who can't protect themselves. That's our legacy. Young Sarah touched the gravestone thoughtfully. I'll remember, Mama. I promise. Good girl. Mara took her daughter's hand and they walked back down the hill toward the ranch house, its windows glowing warm in the darkness. Come on, let's go home. And as they walked, Mar could almost hear her father's voice on the wind, mixing with her mother's laugh and Aunt Sarah's gentle encouragement. Not ghosts, but memory. Not haunting, but blessing. She'd been marked no one's child and left to die in the frozen darkness. But she'd become the root of a family tree that would stand for generations, spreading branches across the frontier, bearing fruit long after everyone who'd started the story was dust. Bo Kincaid had saved her life. But in doing so, he'd saved his own. And together they'd built something that would outlast them both. A legacy of love, strength, and unbreakable family bonds. The hawk and the sparrow. The broken man and the abandoned child. Two lost souls who'd found each other in the wilderness and chosen to heal together. Their story was complete, but the legacy they'd built, that was only beginning.